The barn should have been empty. The human swung the lantern high, expecting to scare off a raccoon or chase a restless sheep back into its pen. Instead, the light caught 3 pairs of eyes wide, frightened, unblinking. Children. Alien children. They crouched in the hay, dust clinging to their torn clothes. The smallest clutched a pendant that glimmered faintly, while the other 2 pressed close, as if trying to hide inside each other's shadows. They didn't speak, only stared at him with a mix of fear and desperation. For a long moment, no one moved. The dog padded in behind him, hackles raised, and the children flinched. But when the human crouched, lowering the lantern, his voice was calm. "You're safe here," he said. And for reasons he couldn't explain, the 3 believed him. Caleb Grant didn't know what exactly he was supposed to do with 3 alien kids hiding in his hayloft. He hadn't raised any of his own, much less dealt with royalty. Though, the stitching on their clothes, even tattered and dirt-smudged, spoke of luxury far beyond his weather-beaten farm. Still, he was raised better than to leave children, any children, hungry or cold. He backed away slowly, the dog still tense beside him, then returned 10 minutes later, with a kettle of warm goat's milk and slices of bread, still soft from the afternoon's bake. He'd barely set the tray down when the smallest child, a willowy thing with faint violet skin and 4 fingers, inched forward and took a piece, darting back like a cornered animal. But the others followed, slowly. He watched as their eyes flicked from the food to the barn's open doors, to the dog, and then back to him. Hunger won out. They sat in a huddle as they ate, silent, cautious, their motions oddly elegant, even when scarfing bread like it was their first meal in days. Caleb laid down 2 extra blankets from his truck's emergency stash, spread out over hay so dry it crackled. The dog, Rufus, sniffed the kids once more, before settling on the ground, just below the loft ladder, head resting on his paws. Caleb didn't ask them questions. He had a feeling he wouldn't understand the answers anyway. He stayed in the barn until they slept. The smallest curled up with the blanket wrapped tight like a cocoon, pendant pressed close to her chest. The others leaned against each other, breathing slow, tangled up like siblings might after a long, terrible day. Rufus let out a soft huff, almost a sigh, and closed his eyes. Caleb kept his lantern low and crept back toward the house. He stood for a long time at the window that overlooked the pasture, barn faintly outlined against the moonlight. Who were they? Where had they come from? He didn't see any crash marks, no twisted metal in the field, no lights in the sky, just 3 alien kids in a barn that should have been empty. "I'll sort this out tomorrow," he muttered. It was easier to believe in tomorrow when the night was so quiet. Morning, though, was far from quiet. Caleb woke to shouting, not angry, but scattered voices, excited and urgent, all coming from down the road. He stepped out onto the porch, blinking against the morning sun, and saw a cluster of villagers gathered near the church steeple, necks craned skyward. He followed their gaze. Above the hills, 3 large ships floated in eerie silence. They weren't like any aircraft Caleb knew, too smooth, moving too slow, and casting wide shadows across the fields. Banners unfurled from their undersides, catching the wind. Deep crimson with a crest that shimmered gold, like it had been stitched with molten metal. Behind him, the barn door creaked. The children had seen the ships. The smallest clutched her pendant again. The oldest, a boy, taller, his tunic slashed down one sleeve, pulled the others back from the door. Their eyes were wild now, not from fear of Caleb, but of whatever loomed in the sky. "They're looking for you, aren't they?" Caleb said quietly. None of them answered, but the look on their faces told him everything. He moved fast. A hidden spot behind the hayloft, barely used since he was a boy himself, was cleaned out within 10 minutes. He stashed old feed sacks across the entrance, laid a blanket beneath, and told them, gesturing carefully to hide there if anyone came asking. They obeyed without hesitation. Rufus planted himself at the barn door again. It was just after noon when the ships descended. The ground trembled as they landed. From the first came soldiers tall, lean, and glinting like polished obsidian in ceremonial armor. They didn't speak to the villagers. They only surrounded the farm. Then the carriage descended. No wheels. It hovered just above the soil, silver and gold gleaming in the sun, vines of glowing script trailing its sides like fireflies frozen in time. A ramp extended, and the Empress stepped down. She moved like water, robes flowing behind her, a wind rising around her that didn't touch the grass. Her crown was a living thing, curling up like woven branches, and her face was unreadable, regal, distant, impossibly still. The villagers fell to their knees. Caleb stayed standing. She walked past the soldiers, past the villagers, past the shocked gasps and quiet murmurs. Her feet touched the edge of the barn's shadow. The children, still hidden, held their breath. The lead soldier raised a hand and shouted, "The heirs belong to the crown." Rufus growled. Caleb stepped in front of the barn door. "No one's taking anything from here until we talk." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for a weapon. But the stance he took was the kind of thing you didn't fake, not when the lives of 3 kids, alien or not, were behind you. The soldiers advanced, and the Empress raised one hand. Everything stopped. Her eyes found Caleb. She didn't look at the barn. Not once. Not even when one of the children let out a quiet whimper. Not when a glint of the pendant caught the sun through a crack in the loft. No, her eyes stayed on him. Studying him. Measuring. Then she said, softly but clearly, "You sheltered what even I could not." Behind her, every soldier dropped to one knee. Caleb had never stood before royalty. Certainly not on his farm. Not with a dog at his side and alien children hiding in his hayloft. And never, not once, with an Empress bowing her head in the middle of his pasture. But that was exactly what she did. Only a breath. Only enough for her chin to dip the sort of nod you might miss if you blinked. Yet the weight of it sent a strange chill down his spine. Then she spoke again. "Step aside, farmer." "No," Caleb said, quietly but firm. The air thickened. A dozen soldiers shifted, gauntlets creaking faintly. The one who had shouted before took a step forward, hand on the hilt of something that definitely wasn't just ceremonial. Rufus tensed, growling low. "I said." "I heard what you said," Caleb cut in, "but I don't take orders from people who won't even ask." A murmur went through the villagers. The soldier froze mid-step, his eyes flicking to the Empress. But she didn't look angry. If anything, she looked curious. She stepped forward again. Only then did Caleb realize how tall she was. Not towering, but graceful, in a way that made space feel narrower around her, like the very light bent to her presence. The crown shifted slightly as she stopped only a foot away. "I am their mother." Her voice was even, but something behind it trembled. Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked past her, at the floating carriage, the banners, the people still kneeling in the dust like their spines had been taken from them. Then back at her. "I believe you," he said finally. "But they don't trust you. Not yet." At that, her eyes softened, just a fraction. Her gaze broke from him for the first time, turning, slowly, toward the barn. And there they were. The children had come down, not all the way, just far enough that one could see their small shapes through the slats of the loft. The smallest still clutched her pendant. The boy, older and taller now that he stood, had planted himself on the ledge like he'd throw himself down to defend the others if it came to it. Caleb didn't say a word. He just stepped aside. Not surrendering, not inviting, simply giving space. The Empress didn't call out to them, didn't move closer. Instead, she knelt. Her knees touched the dry barn floor, dust catching in her robes. She placed her hand, palm open, on the ground. "I am not here to take you," she said, and her voice, which before had echoed like a canyon, now cracked just slightly. "I am here to ask you to come back." "Andy." The smallest alien girl tilted her head. Then, as if they'd agreed in silence, all 3 climbed down the ladder together. The dog moved first. Rufus walked up to the children and stood between them and the Empress. His nose twitched, tail down, body still. Then, without warning, he padded up to her and sat not beside her, but behind her. The children followed. They stopped a foot from the Empress. She rose slowly. Eyes on them now, one hand reaching out, but not touching. "You got out," she whispered. "You made it out." The older boy stepped forward. "We didn't know if you'd come," he said. His voice was clear, accented, but perfectly understandable. "You sent us away." "I had to." He didn't reply. The smallest girl reached up and took Caleb's hand. The Empress followed the motion. Her eyes returned to him. "You fed them," she said. "They were hungry. You let them sleep here. They were tired. You protected them when they had nothing." Caleb didn't answer this time. She already knew the answer. That was the strange part, the way she looked at him, like she was remembering something that hadn't happened yet. They stayed at the farm until evening. The soldiers did not enter the house, the villagers did not rise, no one dared move without her word. But the Empress sat beneath the tree, behind the barn, a twisted old maple Caleb's grandfather had once planted, and the children sat beside her, eating the stew he'd made from whatever he had in the pantry. Caleb treated the youngest's bruised arm. It wasn't broken, but he checked the joint, flexed it gently, asked her to squeeze his hand. She winced, but not badly. He wrapped it with a clean bandage and asked if she could feel her fingers. She nodded. When the middle one, the quiet boy, showed him a cut behind his ear, he disinfected it with iodine and dressed it with surgical tape. A clean dressing was enough, but he told him plainly, "That's gonna sting in the rain. You'll need it looked at properly when you get home." Home. It felt strange, using that word for a floating ship with golden banners. None of the children corrected him. The Empress didn't intervene once. She just watched. As the stars came out, a circle of small fires flickered across the hilltops. More ships had arrived. A larger one, darker and quieter, hovered above the fields without a sound. Its insignia glowed faintly like embers behind smoke. The Empress stood beside Caleb now. "You should know," she said, her voice lower. "They weren't lost." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "They were placed." She looked down at her feet, her hands clasped tightly. "We suspected there were factions inside the court that wished harm upon them. Hiding them in a corner of this planet was not an accident, it was a test." Caleb's stomach twisted. A test. To see who would help them. He said nothing, not because he couldn't, but because everything inside him was trying to decide whether to be angry or simply exhausted. "They're children," he said, "not puzzles to be solved." She nodded. "I did not expect it to be you," she said. "I didn't expect it to be anyone." A pause. Then she added, "But there's something else." That night, she gave him a folded piece of parchment, smooth and strange, thick like cured hide but soft as silk. The writing on it shimmered, not in any ink he recognized. "The prophecy," she said, "from my grandmother's era, it speaks of a ground walker who shelters starlight." Caleb didn't reply. Not a knight, not a soldier, just someone who chooses kindness when power is not watching. He looked at the children, now asleep near the coals of the fire. "I don't want anything from this," he said. She smiled truly, for the first time. "Then that's why you were chosen." By morning, the ships were gone. Not all of them, but the ones with teeth, the ones that had loomed like judgment. Only the royal carriage remained, floating quietly beside the barn like a forgotten ornament. Caleb had expected the fields to be trampled, the fences torn, the soil churned by landing gear. But the grass lay flat only in circles, as if pressed down by a gentle hand, no scorch marks, no damage. Just silence. The Empress was still there too. She hadn't slept, or if she had, it hadn't been in anything resembling a bed. She stood with the sunrise, arms folded beneath her cloak, watching the horizon like she was waiting for the world to catch up. The children were up early. The girl helped Caleb with the goats, following his movements and mimicking each task like it was a lesson she'd been waiting for. The middle one fed the chickens, carefully scattering cracked corn with both hands. And the oldest, the boy who still hadn't given a name, helped fix the broken latch on the barn door. They didn't ask for anything. They just worked, quietly, diligently, like farm kids who'd been here all along. Around mid-morning, something shifted. The boy dropped a hammer. Caleb turned, expecting to see a smashed thumb or a bent nail, but the boy was frozen in place, eyes wide. His hands trembled slightly. Behind him, a figure emerged from the tall grass, humanoid, but not quite right, too angular. Its limbs moved like scaffolding rather than muscle. The surface of its face rippled in static, and its shadow fell in the wrong direction. Caleb grabbed the boy's arm and pulled him behind the tractor. The figure didn't speak. It didn't seem armed. But the air around it cracked faintly, as if its presence bent the temperature itself. The Empress appeared seconds later. She didn't shout. She didn't draw anything. She simply walked forward and placed herself between the creature and the barn. "Not here," she said. The creature twitched. A sound followed like glass folding and the figure vanished. Caleb exhaled, only when the pressure in his ears stopped. That night, the Empress told him the truth. They weren't just heirs, they're carriers. Caleb sat at the table, she across from him. The children were asleep. In the loft again they'd insisted. "Carriers of what?" he asked. She hesitated. For the first time, she looked unsure of how much to say. "Memory," she said. "Legacy. There are genetic sequences, threads passed down through lineages on our worlds. Your species stores history in paper. We encode it into blood." Caleb blinked. "You're saying they are your history?" "More than that. They are the sum of every ruler before me. Our decisions, mistakes, everything. That's what made them targets." He looked up at the loft. "You made them leave so they couldn't be used. So they could become their own selves before the weight of who we were crushed who they could be." He didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, "That's a lot to put on kids." "Yes," she said softly. "But they've survived it better than I expected." The next morning, Caleb woke to a sound he knew too well: metal on gravel. A military transport had pulled up on the far end of the farm, wheeled. Not floating, this time. More grounded. From it stepped two physicians in pale uniforms, followed by an interpreter with a crystalline device hovering above one shoulder. The Empress met them near the barn. "It's time," she said. The boy didn't resist. He stepped forward first, sleeves rolled up, arm extended. The older medic scanned it with a portable reader, murmuring in another language. The other two children followed. Blood samples, joint assessments, reflex tests. Caleb watched closely. When the middle boy winced during a pressure test on his ribs, the physician paused. "Hairline fracture," the interpreter translated. "Left eighth rib, from a fall?" "Landed wrong," the boy admitted. "Jumped off a moving cart." Caleb frowned. "How long ago?" 3, maybe 4 days. "No bruising?" "Already faded." The physician adjusted his scanner. "It's healing clean, no displacement. But he'll need to rest for a week minimum. Painkillers adjusted for his biology." Caleb nodded. "No climbing, no lifting, no jumping off carts." The physician actually smiled. They moved on to the smallest, the girl. A ligament strain in the wrist. No breaks. Splint required, soft bandage for support. The Empress crouched beside her as they wrapped it. "You'll be fine," she whispered. The girl didn't look at her. She looked at Caleb. When the assessments were done, the Empress called for the ship. But the children didn't move. "Do we have to leave?" the boy asked. "You are not prisoners," she said. "But the court expects you." "We want Rufus to come," the middle boy said. Caleb choked on his coffee. The Empress blinked. "The dog? He protected us." "He sleeps in front of the barn so nothing sneaks up," the girl added. "Even when he snores, it's safer with him there." Caleb looked at Rufus, who was licking his own paw and oblivious to his sudden diplomatic role. "He doesn't like spaceships," Caleb offered. The Empress turned to Rufus. "Is that true?" Rufus stared blankly, then yawned. She stood. "Very well. He comes." Caleb walked them to the ship himself. The children hugged him awkwardly, like kids unsure whether it was allowed. The middle boy held on the longest. The girl pressed her pendant into Caleb's palm and closed his fingers over it. "It's for you now," she said. "I can't take this. You kept us safe." He didn't argue again. The Empress came last. She stood at the top of the ramp, robes fluttering in the updraft, and looked down at him. "You did more than shelter them," she said. "They're just kids." She smiled, but it was a sad one. "You say that like it isn't enough." Then, after a pause, "There will be others." Caleb looked up. "Children? People. Fleeing, searching, falling out of the stars. He understood. I'll keep the barn unlocked. The ship lifted off without fanfare. No banners trailing, no anthems echoing across the hills. Just a soft displacement of air, a shimmer as it breached the low clouds, and then nothing but blue sky, and a faint circle in the grass where it had been. Caleb stood by the fence, arms crossed, the pendant still warm in his hand. Rufus had gone with them, tail wagging awkwardly, as the children clung to him one last time before boarding. The boy had called back, "We'll bring him back for spring lambing," like it was the most natural promise in the universe. And then they were gone. The days that followed were quiet, in the way empty places often are, not desolate, just still. The kind of silence that settles over a house when children leave for school, or after a family gathering breaks apart. The barn smelled of hay and smoke again, not starlight and fear. Caleb fixed the upper loft where the boards had cracked under the boy's weight. He patched a hole in the roof, scraped dried mud from the steps, re-oiled the door hinges so they didn't groan every time the wind shifted. He left the blankets where they were, just folded them neatly, stacked in a corner. Cleaned, but untouched, like a guest room for someone who might come back. A week passed, then 2. One afternoon, a girl from the village came by with a basket of eggs. He hadn't asked for them, word had spread. Quietly. The kind of stories people whispered at the edge of a field, pretending they didn't believe but asking anyway. "Did they eat real food?" she asked. "Yes," Caleb said. "Liked goat's milk." She blinked. "Did they glow?" "Only when scared." Her eyes went wide, and she practically skipped back down the drive. A grin stretched across her face like it held a secret. He didn't mind. Let them tell their stories. The real one was his to keep. 3 months after the departure, Rufus returned. The ship didn't land. It didn't need to. A beam of soft white light spilled into the pasture, and there he was, tail thumping, ears perked, and carrying something in his mouth. A note, written in a strange mix of human script and something older, looped like vines curling across the page. The message was simple. He snored too loud on the velvet cushions. "We think he missed mud." There was a paw print at the bottom, Rufus's, presumably, or maybe one of the kids. Caleb laughed until his ribs ached. Spring came early that year. The rains were late, but the soil turned easy under his boots. The goats fattened up nicely, the chickens laid with almost mechanical efficiency, and the maple behind the barn bloomed wider than it ever had. He found the pendant again in his jacket pocket one evening and turned it over in the lamplight. The glow was fainter now, quieter, like it knew its job was done. He still didn't know what the symbols meant. He didn't need to. 2 seasons later, the Empress returned. Alone. No soldiers, no floating carriage. Just a 2-seater craft, the size of a pickup truck, humming gently as it settled near the pond. She stepped out dressed plainly, if anything, too plainly. Her robe was woven linen, gray with threadbare trim, no crown in sight. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said. "You're barefoot. It's good to feel the ground." She walked with him along the fence line. The air smelled of late summer and cut alfalfa. No crowds, no kneeling, no audience but wind and birdsong. "How are they?" he asked. "Thriving, testing their limits." The girl painted the ceiling of the great hall. "Really?" "In mud," she added with a smile. "But the court calls it symbolic rebellion." Caleb chuckled. "And the dog?" "Refuses to eat anything that doesn't smell like your barn." They reached the old tree. She sat on the same bench he'd built years ago from salvaged wood. He remained standing, arms resting on the top rail. "I didn't come for them," she said. "I figured." She took something from her pocket, a seed, smooth and silver, almost mechanical. She handed it to him without explanation. "It will grow here," she said, "when the time is right." "What is it?" "Not important now. Just something that remembers." He turned it over in his fingers. "I don't want statues." "It's not a statue. It's a memory that knows how to wait." They sat in silence a long time. Just as the sun dipped low, she added quietly, "You changed the way we teach legacy." Caleb didn't answer. Just watched the sky turn amber. "You didn't just protect them," she said. "You taught them what safety felt like." She rose, brushing grass from her knees. "I should go." He looked over. You're welcome to stay. I know. That's why I can leave. That night, he dug a hole behind the barn, planted the seed, watered it, Saturday beside it until the stars came out, just to be sure. It didn't glow, didn't hum, didn't shift. It just settled. And that, he thought, was enough. Years passed. The stories grew stranger. Some said the Empress had been a ghost. Others claimed the farmer was a retired galactic marshal hiding on Earth. Some insisted the pendant was a key to a royal vault hidden under the Appalachians. A few even believed the children never existed at all. Caleb never corrected anyone. He just tended the barn. Every so often, a stranger would show up, not always alien, not always young, but always looking for something. Caleb never asked what. He just offered them bread and blankets, pointed to the loft, and said, "You're safe here." And for reasons he still didn't understand, they always believed him.